Hi everyone. This Sunday's Gospel reading is unique in that it begins exactly how last Sunday's Gospel left off. We have this sense of time travel, which only occurs during Holy Week when the days and Gospels blend into one another. Why? Well, nothing in the church is accidental, and quite literally everything actually has significance. So, to refresh and also begin again, the Gospel starts with, "At that time, he made the disciples get into the boat and go before him to the other side, while he dismissed the crowds." What is the purpose of not only continuing with this passage instead of following the sequence of Gospel readings, but also even repeating the same words as the way last week ended? Well, for starters, Jesus had gone before the disciples to the location of the multiplication of the loaves and fish because he wanted to be alone and pray. Remember, he had just lost his cousin St. John the Baptist and needed space after he was quickly met by thousands of people, including the disciples. Not very restful, if you ask me. It makes practical sense that Jesus sent his disciples to prepare the next place for his journey, but it's also important to observe that he sent everyone away with a dismissal, similarly to how we end our divine liturgy. We go in peace to carry our work on for the week. We don't stay forever in the church. We bring the church with us. Jesus then prays, maybe giving thanks to the Father, maybe praying for St. John, maybe just needing some time for prayer and for rest after all that transpired. We then hear about the disciples being in the middle of the water. It was very early in the morning, and they were being beaten up by the waves and the wind. I'm not sure if you've ever been on rough seas, but it can be pretty scary out there. In the midst of their fighting to stay on course and combat the rough seas and winds, they saw a vision. It was Jesus, although they thought it was a ghost. Understandably, they were scared. Not only were they scared for their unpleasant sailing experience, but because they thought that they were losing their minds and seeing a ghost. Jesus didn't let them stay scared long. He calms them immediately. Pay attention to what he says. "Take heart, it is I." In Greek it says, "I am." And "have not fear." This sounds familiar to when Moses was on Mount Sinai, and when he asked the voice of God who he was through the bush and through the cloud, he said, "I am." If you've ever noticed, all icons of Christ have the word "he who is," or in Greek, "oon," because he truly is the source of all being, the very essence of God, he who is. This did calm the disciples, especially Peter. Peter helps inspire us in our faith because he shows that it's okay to doubt and to have times where we don't believe, but also that even through his doubt, he still believes. His very human and humble experience helps us along our faith journey as we rise and dip in our spiritual strength. He asked Jesus to call him onto the water, and Jesus does. His faith brought him out onto the raging sea, just as our faith helps us to carry through stormy times in our lives. However, just as we often experience, Peter was frightened when he looked around and saw that the wind was still present. Notice he didn't look down and see the water, or at least that's what the gospel says. He saw the wind. Maybe he saw what the wind was doing to the boat or the sea, but it could have just been that he felt the wind around him. And just knowing that the storm was rushing around was enough to cause him to sink. We too may feel the storm around us, even while feeling serene in our hearts that Christ is in our midst and rescuing us. Our doubt or even disbelief that we should be saved is enough to bring us into the depths of the waters, even more than before we felt the presence of God, as in this situation. We are not failures for this, but believers who struggle. Peter cried out to Jesus to save him, and Jesus did. Jesus said, "O man of little faith, why do you doubt?" He didn't say, "You have no faith, Peter. How could you not trust me?" He said, "Of little faith," We too may have points in our lives when faith is little, but as long as it is still there, even the faith as small as a mustard seed, we hear in another place in the gospel, we are able to move mountains. When Jesus and Peter got into the boat, the storm stopped. Was this experienced by the disciples because they all doubted? Does this show us our lives without Christ in our boat? The Orthodox Church itself is often shaped like a boat, which symbolizes our lives at sea, with the Church and Christ Himself being our safe harbor. A life without Christ at the center is like living in open ocean with danger lurking all around. A life in Christ is always like having the shore in sight, knowing that whatever weather may arise, we're close to safety. Let Christ always travel in your boat through life, and you will have safe sailing. It doesn't mean there won't be storms or winds or no wind in our sails, but you will have a captain on board, guiding you each step of the way. Have a blessed week ahead.